Hey guys, it's Penelope in London. What I'm going to tackle is chapter 5 of this book. I've done I've done the first, second, and third, fourth chapter, which you can see on my videos on my YouTube page. I suggest getting this book. It works in paragraphs, which is really beautiful. So I'm going to tackle a few paragraphs today from the chapter Christ, a Symbol of the Self. There's something else I wanted to address before I do that. I'm going to show you here. This is really important to me because what I think on social media, we have a lot of memes that go around, and you can see here that you've probably seen this many times yourself, where it says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. It took me a long time to digest and internalize what that actually meant to me, but through synchronicity and understanding and looking at my shadow, I've begun to see this play out. What I'd like to point out here is if you look to the text over on the left, you can see that this is from the book I'm actually reading here, and it's on paragraph 126. What Jung actually said was the psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. So you can see the difference there, that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Here he says, the psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. Now that I get more actually, when I saw that, I was really pleased to see where it come from and understand that it is on 126, paragraph 126, not page, but paragraph. Young, I also added to this, made a post on my Facebook page that many people quote Jung as saying the below, which was this meme here. And what I actually said is above. It's the same thing in line, that we will act out our unconscious and we will think it's fate. So many of our early imprints and traumas and whatever we've been through, and, you know, codependency or relationship problems, they're going to stem back from either implicit memory, unconscious, possibly the collective unconscious as well. It's very deep work looking at Jung, but the more you get into it and over the years as you do it, it'll begin to take shape and form and in understanding at a deep level. Jung advised that we look at the shadow in order to integrate that which is unconscious. We have implicit memory and conditioning and treatments received in the early years where we've been on autopilot. No man is our savior, and only we can do the inner work. So now what I'm going to do is move over here, and I'm going to come off screen, and I'm going to read. I'm going to get rid of my camera, and I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs of this beautiful book and see how I go with it. Some of the words are a bit complex or in French and I can't pronounce them, but I'll jump those bits. I'm not reading the footnotes here. I'm literally, because there's a lot of footnote work in his work, I'm going to be literally reading a few paragraphs as I go, and I'll tell you which ones they are. Okay. Right. So what we have is we have page 36 and it's paragraph 68, and I'm going to read from there. So the de-Christination sensation of our world. So he's saying de-Christing our world, the Luciferian development of science and technology, and the frightful material and moral destruction left behind by the Second World War have been compared more than once with the eschatological events foretold in the New Testament. These, as we know, are concerned with the coming age of the Antichrist. This is Antichrist who denieth the Father and the Son. Every spirit that dissolveth Jesus is Antichrist, of whom you have heard that he cometh. The apocalypse, forgive me there with these words, the apocalypse is full of expectations of terrible things that will take place at the end of time before the marriage of the Lamb. This shows plainly that the anima Christiana as a sure knowledge not only of the existence of an adversary, but also of his future usurpation of power. Why, my reader, this is now number 69 that I'm reading, paragraph. Why, my reader, will I ask, do I discourse here upon Christ and his adversary, the Antichrist? Our discourse necessarily brings us to Christ because he is still living myth of our culture. He is our culture hero, who, regardless of his historical existence, embodies the myth of the divine primordial man, the mystic Adam. It is he who occupies the center of the Christian Mandala and who is the Lord of the tetramorph, i.e., he says, the four symbols of the evangelists, which are like the four columns of his throne. He is in us and we in him. His kingdom is the pearl of great price, the treasure buried in the field, the grain of mustard seed, which will become a great tree, and the heavenly city. As Christ is in us, so also is his heavenly kingdom. So a little what I'm thinking of that. So what I found with Jung's work, and I'm going to read a few more paragraphs, what I have found is that I digest it really, slowly. Like, it's not something that you read and you get straight away. Some people might, but I think it's unusual. Like, I know that when I had to look at the anima and the animus in the previous chapters of this book, and when he says here that Christ as a symbol of self, like when we look at the myth, and I know that some people might find that rude that it's a myth, but to say that it's a myth, but when we look to the planets, and I'm an evolutionary astrologer, when we look at the mythology that's been poured in through the constellations that have been poured into the biblical stories and also to the collective unconscious, that we basically, that having a Christ within is part of the deal of being human. I think it's not separate. There is no separation. I would actually like to add as well, there's a wonderful friend that I friended on Facebook, and she's a beautiful photographer, and this is Deb Powell. This is one of her pictures. It's absolutely stunning, and it speaks to me beautifully, the wisdom, the beauty, and that all of these things that we see, all of the images and the symbols and how they touch our hearts, and of course the symbol of Christ as well. I'm going to read a few more paragraphs here. So this is paragraph 70. These few familiar references should be sufficient to make the psychological position of the Christ symbol quite clear. Christ exemplifies the archetype of the self. He represents a totality of a divine or heavenly kind, a glorified man, a son of God. And then it's a little bit here in French, which I think it says sine macle peccati, or it could be Italian, unspotted by sin. As Adam secundus, he corresponds to the first Adam before the fall, when the latter was still a pure image of God, of which Aion, and he says, he's referring to 222, maybe footnote, says, and this therefore to be considered as the image of God in man, that the human spirit has the same motions and senses as God has, though not in the same way as God has them. Origin is very much more explicit. The imago Dei imprinted on the soul, not on the body, is an image of an image. For my soul is not directly the image of God, but it is made after the likeness of the former image. Christ, on the other hand, is the true image of God, after whose likeness our inner man is made, inevitable, incorporeal, incorrupt, and immortal. The God image in us reveals itself through prudenta, and this again, it's probably actually, probably not Italian. I will get there with his work, but Latin maybe. That's probably more to the point. Looking at this, I can't. So he goes prudenta, iustiata, Modino, virtuous, it goes on, but I'll stick with the English bits for now because I don't know Latin. So this is now 71, paragraph 71. St. Augustine distinguishes between the God image, which is Christ, and the image which is implanted in man as means of possibility of becoming like God. The God image is not in the corporal man, but in the anima rationalis, the possession of which distinguishes man from animals. The God image is within, not in the body, where the understanding is, where the mind is, where the power of investigating truth is. There God has his image. So maybe that would be consciousness. I'm just thinking about what he's saying there. you know, the consciousness, like where does consciousness come from? And our consciousness keeps expanding, and how synchronicity and how things, you know, appear to be fate, but it's really just the unconscious trying to bring something conscious, and the pain that we suffer, and how we have light bulb moments, and what God is within when we look at the beauty of this swan, or we look at the beauty of flowers and the numinous and the art and the music that people can, and just the emotions and feelings and the beauty that's within us. Also, I'm going to continue reading. Therefore, we should remind ourselves, says Augustine, that we are fashioned after the image of God, nowhere save in the understanding, but where man knows himself to be made after the image of God. There he knows there is something more in him than is given to the beasts. From this, it is clear that the God image is, so to speak, identical with the anima rationalis, and that is probably, again, I'm reading there. It's part of the book that one would have to explore deeply and look at those words to make true understanding. And if it's Latin, I would definitely, it's something after I've decided I'm going to read through this book once, and then I will go back over it with a finer tooth comb. Continuing reading. The latter is the higher spiritual man, the homo Colliatis of St. Paul. Like Adam before the fall, Christ is an embodiment of the God image, whose totality is specially emphasized by St. Augustine. The Word, he says, took on complete manhood, as it were, in its fullness, the soul and the body of man. And if you would have me put it more exactly, since even a beast of the field has a soul and a body, when I say human soul and human flesh, I mean, he took upon him a complete human soul. So, of course, to me, you know, animals have souls as well. That's how I see animals. And that's, you know, affected my diet over the last few years, what I choose to eat as well. No judgment on what people eat, but I'm really become more aware. When I saw at one point, I was looking into a baby calf, the eyes of a baby calf, and I saw a soul, and that changed my choice of food. But again, no judgment. We're all on our own journey. Number 72, I'm going to read now. The God image in man was not destroyed by the fall, but was only damaged and corrupted, deformed, and can be restored through God's grace. The scope of the integration is suggested by the, again, we got some Latin by the looks of it, by the Descensus and Inferos, the descent of Christ's soul to hell, its work of redemption embracing even the dead. The psychological equivalent of this is the integration of the collective unconscious, which forms an essential part of the individuation process. St. Augustine says, therefore, our end must be our perfection, and our perfection is Christ, since he is the perfect image, God image. For this reason, he is also called king. His bride, sponsor, is the human soul, which is an inwardly hidden spiritual mystery, is joined to the word, that two may be in one flesh, to correspond with the mystic marriage of Christ and the church, concurrently with the continuance of the Herios, I believe that is, changing pages here, Herios Gamos, is the dogma and rites of the church, the symbolisms developed in the course of the Middle Ages into the alchemical conjunction of opposites by simical wedding, I believe that says, thus giving rise on one hand to the concept of the lapis philosophorum, I think, signifying totality, and on the other hand to the concept of chemical combination. The God image, this is now 73, the God image in man that was damaged by the first sin can be reformed with the help of God in accordance with Romans, he says 12:2, and he be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God. RSV, he says, the totality images which the unconscious produces in the course of an individuation process are similar reformations of a priori archetype, the Mandalas. As I have already emphasized, the spontaneous symbols of the self or of wholeness cannot in practice be distinguished from a God image, despite the word, and I can't read this one, it's very small as well, be transformed. In the Greek text of the above quotation, the renewal of the mind is not meant as an actual alteration of consciousness, but rather as the restoration of an original condition. This is to exact agreement which the empirical findings of psychology that there is an ever-present archetype of wholeness. This is really worth knowing. I came across this the other day, that, the reality is the self, and this would be in internal family systems, which is a system which is brilliant for psychological system, looking at our psychology, that there's a part of self that is not damaged. And whilst we suffer, if we can understand there's part of self that is not damaged, it's very useful in our healing process. Continuing reading, I'm going to read this bit again, actually. This is the exact restoration of an original and I can't read that bit. This is an exact, of an original condition. This is an exact agreement with the empirical findings of psychology that there is an ever-present archetype of wholeness, which may easily disappear from the purview of consciousness, or may never be perceived at all until a consciousness illuminated by conversion recognize it in the figure of Christ. As a result of this animus, the original state of oneness with the God image is restored. It brings about an integration, a bridging of the split in the personality caused by the instincts striving apart in different and mutually contradictory directions. The only time the split does not occur is when a person is still as legitimately unconscious of his instinctual life as an animal, but it proves harmful and impossible to endure when an artificial unconsciousness, a repression, no longer reflects the life of the instincts. So I'm going to leave it there for today, and I may do more of this. For those who are probably serious about Jung, I'd say probably get this book yourself, and you'll see for yourself why I'm struggling with a few of the words there. But I think that it sinks in, and then you go back and you pull out a Latin sort of definition of whatever's being said to really bring it together and to integrate it. I hope that's useful for today, and I'll be back with some more of this in the coming week as I will read through it myself. Thanks for watching.